what is the estate or death tax? Where is it today and where is it likely going? And is there a huge deadline I need to worry about? Because the answer to the last question is yes, there is a huge deadline you may need to worry about. So the estate or death tax is a tax imposed on assets before they go to your heirs. So if your estate exceeds the exemption amount, the amount that you can pass tax-free, it's taxed at a 40% rate. That's the current estate tax rate. Any amount under that goes tax-free. So this also applies to lifetime gifts. So if you give away a bunch of money during your life, you have to file gift tax returns, and that goes against your lifetime exemption. The exemption amount is what you can pass tax-free, and it includes large gifts during life and what's left after someone passes away. So how much can you leave today to your heirs without taxes? You can currently leave $13.61 million per person. So for a couple, it's over $27 million. There's one for husband, one for wife, or one for each spouse. That can go to your heirs, your kids, whoever that is, tax-free. Now, any dollar amount over that is taxed at the current estate tax rate of 40%. So it's a punishing tax. A small fraction of tax-paying families face this tax. It's far less than 1%. I think it was just a few thousand families in all of America last year. It's at an all-time high, the exemption. Now, there is a huge deadline coming, and we have to keep a close eye on elections because the party in charge in the next year or two will have a huge say over where this law will go. So I'll go over the different scenarios in just a moment. There's a current deadline. That's because the current law that governs the estate tax, the Tax Cut and Jobs Act of 2017 that was passed when Republicans were in charge of the Senate, the Congress, and the presidency, it sunsets on December 31st, 2025. The current exemption, the current law that set the exemption at $13.61 million sunsets. What happens then? The exemption will drop by 50%. So currently it's $10 million adjusted for inflation. That's why it's this sort of random number, 13.61 million. It will drop down to $5 million indexed to inflation. So it'd be about $7 million per person. So if you have an estate that exceeds $7 million, and keep in mind, your estate includes your house, your retirement accounts, your investment accounts, life insurance, any future inheritance, unless your parents did a lot of planning. So your estate's probably larger than you think, but hey, it's still a good problem to have. A very small fraction of families have over $7 million. But if you're over $7 million, you need to be aware of this deadline because there's a lot that you can do before that deadline to protect millions in assets. Like if you make a large transfer of say 14 million, if you're lucky enough to have that before the exemption drops, we can make the transfer of 14 million, use your $14 million exemption. Then even if it drops next year, you should be okay. There should be no retroactive tax applied. However, if you don't use all of it, you can't give away 7 million before the deadline and it drops from 14 to 7 and say, oh, IRS, well, I had 7 million left before the deadline. Let me give away 7 million now. No, the exemption just counts towards whatever your current gift is. So kind of a use it or lose it type of deal. So that's what is most likely to happen with the law. But let's look at different scenarios for if Democrats control the government or if Republicans control the government, or a third scenario when there's a split. And when I say control the government, I mean the federal branches. There's the executive branch, the presidency, the Senate, and the Congress. And anybody who observes the government knows that unless one party controls all three, there's gridlock and hardly anything happens. So I'll go through the most likely scenario. So the most likely scenario is there's a mix. So if Republicans control two of the three branches, presidency and the Senate, Democrats control the Congress, or vice versa, whichever two of three it is, if there's a mix in control, they almost certainly won't pass anything new and the exemption will probably sunset. So it'll probably go from about $14 million per person next year indexed with inflation down to $7 million per person. So if you're high net worth, you need to worry about this. Okay, well, let's look at another scenario. If Republicans win all three branches of the government in the 2024 elections, what might happen then? Well, in that case, it looks like Republicans work to simply extend the current law. There's been some other talk about different approaches, but the most likely outcome would be that they simply extend the current law. There is no sunset. There's no cliff happening on January 1st, 2026. And maybe if you're high net worth, you don't need to worry too much. But that's only if Republicans control all three branches. And even then, there's a chance they might not get their act together to pass any new tax laws. And maybe they do change their rules. Maybe they do lower the exemption. I think that's unlikely. Now, if Democrats win all three branches of the government, the presidency, the Senate, and the Congress, it's a totally different scenario. There have been Democratic proposals to lower the exemption all the way to $3.5 million per person and to increase the estate tax rate. So the exemption could go from 13.61 million all the way down to 3.5 million. Not only that, the rate at which they're taxed could go up from 40% to 55% or even 60%. That's been part of Democratic proposals. So if you have a large estate, You have to be aware of this. And keep in mind, again, the value of your home, if you have a rental property, life insurance, retirement accounts, inheritance from other relatives in the future, that all can be part of your estate. So your estate may be a lot bigger than you think. And if the exemption drops to 3.5 million, simply owning a house in many parts of the country might already expose you to estate and gift taxes. So what do you need to do? Before that deadline, long before, work with an expert. Our firm, Gilfix and the Pole Associates, is already getting busy with this, working with a lot of our clients. You need to work with an estate and gift tax expert, estate planning experts. Don't dabble with this. Don't try to do this yourself. There are a lot of totally legal ways that you can take advantage of the higher exemption and even avoid other taxes if you do it before the deadline. But it is use it or lose it. So if you don't take action before the law changes, you may lose the opportunity forever. Follow our Gilfix Law channel. We're going to keep you up to date. We're going to keep a very close eye on what happens with elections. But let's look at those three scenarios. A mix in the federal government, Democratic Party controlling, Republican Party controlling, they could have vastly different impacts on where estate and gift taxes are going. One tip that you don't need a lawyer for is you can give up to $18,000 a year to as many people as you want. And that doesn't even count against the estate and gift tax exemption. You give $18,000 gifts to 10 different people, $180,000, you don't even have to report it to the IRS. Democrats are talking about reducing that ability to making it only two $10,000 gifts total without reporting to the IRS. Anything over that, you have to report it. It would have to go against your lifetime gift tax exemption, currently at $13.61 million. So talk to experts, work with experts. Our firm, Gilfix and the Pole, can help. We're helping a lot of people. There are so many strategies that we can use to totally legally protect millions of dollars before these deadlines. So if you're lucky enough to have this problem, don't wait. Start planning now, because we estate planning attorneys will be crushed with demand next year, assuming this exemption is dropping. How do you stay on top of all of this? Well, subscribe to the Gilfix Law YouTube channel, like this, share this with anybody who needs to see it. Maybe it's your parents, your grandparents who need to see this, but don't get caught with this exemption dropping at the last minute trying to do something. It could be a massive multi-million-dollar issue for you and your family.